You know, when you're working on a single project for a year or two, at some point there comes a moment when you're like, dang, I don't like where this is going. The results you're getting just don't align with your expectations. You try to fix things, but the more you do it, the further you get from what you originally wanted. The likely cause for it is that you haven't written down your ideas when you were starting out. Or maybe at that moment, you just didn't have a clear vision of the project. Actually, it seems like there can be a ton of reasons why this happens. Yet the problem is here. We're deep into the development hell, probably with some form of creative crisis coming up on the horizon. There are two main options we have here. Number one, do our best to finish what we already have and just move on. Number two, try to reimagine the ideas, get a clear vision of the project, and do it all properly this time. Both options are valid in different situations. In our case, number one seems, screw it! We're definitely going to win number two, because I have already given too much love to this side project of mine. No turning back at this point. During my creative crisis period, I played a lot of Noita, a very fascinating 2D action roguelike game about this little witch trying to find her way in a world where every pixel is simulated, and has an unstoppable desire to kill her. And oh boy, it's good at it. The game has a ton of content, various secrets, and cool bugs/exploits. But my absolute favorite thing about it is wand tinkering. Basically, the game allows you to customize your magic wands with a large number of various spells that can do quite literally anything, if you combine them properly, of course. At first, you combine some simple spells and get somewhat working results. But once you start understanding the game and its specifics, you will be able to build one so powerful that even your computer will beg for mercy. This mechanic fascinated me so much that I remembered an old idea of mine about adding a way to customize arrows to Zares. Back then, I figured that the skill tree system could handle various arrow effects quite well, so I put that idea away. The more I worked on the skill system though, the more I saw how clunky and unintuitive arrow effects were, which left me very confused on what I was supposed to do about it. In addition to that, the game seemed more and more like a bad Souls-like with a bow, where mechanical skill was everything and creativity meant nothing. Very far from a fun robot hunter RPG sandbox I had in mind, huh? But now, after playing Noita, my eyes are open. I have finally found the mechanic I always wanted. If you still can't see how it fits in the game, let me give you a quick explanation of what I have in mind. At first, we will give the player an ability to customize arrows, Noita style, supporting various skill combinations and builds. Then we will redesign all of the enemies in the game to work with this system. I want every machine to have a simplified simulation of its inner parts, each with its purpose, vulnerabilities, and a way for the player to interact with or disable it using various arrow builds. This will add a lot of depth to the combat system, making it more based on discovering weaknesses and adapting to them. This in its turn finally shifts the game towards a robot hunting simulator, which was the original idea. To customize arrows, you will first need to discover blueprints for the modules you want. Those will be found in ruins all over the game's world, some look behind puzzles and quests. This approach will encourage exploration and, if done properly, won't even feel repetitive. Once you unlock the blueprint, you will be able to use that module in your builds, which will also require specific resources obtained by hunting down the machines. Each machine will drop a set of resources associated with its functionality. So when, for example, you see a robot glowing with flaming red and spraying heat all over the place, you will know that you can get some fire-related components from it. And vice versa, if you need a water bubble generator, you should go and find a machine that shoots water bubbles at you. Pretty intuitive and respectful to the player's expectations, which is very cool. Alright, now all of the basic ideas explained, let's get into some detail on what exactly I have been doing lately. Before implementing customization, I worked a bit on the arrows themselves, improving physics and making their behavior more complex. Now, depending on the angle of the impact and the material's density, the arrow can either get stuck in the object or bounce from it. If the arrow doesn't bounce, it pierces through the surface, and depending on how fast it went, it can either stay inside of the object or go right through it. This behavior mainly depends on a parameter I call blunt piercing balance. It's a float value where 0 means neutral, -1 makes the arrow blunt, and +1 makes it pierce things. Blunt arrows have a stronger impact but almost always bounce. They will be efficient for removing armor. Piercing arrows almost always go inside of the target and can travel far into it. This will be useful for neutralizing machine components that are located deep inside of the body. This behavior also depends on the physical properties of the material the arrow hits. For example, I gave this monument very high density, so piercing it is a very difficult task. And at the same time, this wall has a very low density, so even blunt arrows get stuck in it. I also changed the way the arrow flies by adding air friction and dynamically tweaking the gravity to simulate glide. These changes made the arrow trajectory go from this to this, which is a bit more realistic and interesting, at least in my opinion. Now to the actual customization system. First things first, I had to decide on how all of it is going to function. I wanted the arrow builds to be represented by trees. Not these trees! These ones! That's better. Basically, when you put some mods together, you will get one arrow which will execute all of its modules left-right. At the end of the branch, you can put a splitter modification that will spawn a new arrow with its own branch, and so on. But this adult another question arose. How am I going to store these builds? Saving the whole data structure seemed rather dumb, as there is quite a lot of information filled in during runtime. So I figured out a way to reliably encode these builds into strings, and quite obviously decode them back. This way you can store arrow builds right in the item data, which is pretty useful. With the base of the mechanic implemented, I finally could test the thing for real. My first interesting creation was this. An arrow that upon landing bounces back into the air, splitting multiple times and raining down with explosions. Yeah, explosions still look very dull, but they're going to get better as the video goes. Trust me. Playing around with all of this is pretty fun, but typing into this small field without even being able to see the whole thing at once is rather frustrating. So my next step is implementing user interface for the thing. I mean, how hard can it be? Turns out pretty hard. I spent around 2 weeks working on the UI and it's still far from perfect. At least all of the systems are working as intended, and I'm happy with just that fact. Why? Just why can't you work properly? Why? What am I doing wrong here? Why are you not working? Alright, now let me give you a quick tour with this menu. In the middle, we quite obviously have our tree diagram. You can hover your mouse over the mods if you want to see more info about them. Here at the top, you can see the name of the area you're working on. If you don't like it, you can just click and edit it. If you take your mouse to the bottom of the screen, you will be presented with the mod list. There you can find any module you want and drag it out into the tree. While dragging, you will see a bunch of these gray dots, called slots. If you drop a module over one of them, it will appear at the slot's position. You can also drag and drop nodes that are already in the tree. And if you want to get rid of a certain module, just drag it over to this giant remove mod field. Next, here on the left, we have the arrow list, where you can see every arrow build you have and create new ones. All of it seems pretty intuitive to me, though there is still a ton of job to get done, especially on the mod list. So UI is cool of course, but let's talk a little bit more about modules themselves. Basically, modules are divided into 5 categories. Status modes change various physical and elemental properties of the arrows, such as shifting their blunt-piercing balance or infusing them with various elements. Triggers pause execution and continue it only when certain conditions are met. For example, on impact trigger fires off only when the arrow touches a surface. Action modules, as you can guess, perform some actions on the arrows. As the most generic example, this module creates an explosion at the arrow's position. Yeah, here, I haven't lied and really put work into explosion particles. You happy now? Next, we have modifiers that affect modules that stand up to them. If you have paid a lot of attention, you could notice these two colorful symbols here. The red one is power and the green one is duration. Modifiers change these values, thus affecting other modules. There is no standard implementation of the effects of these values, so every mod is affected by them in its unique way, and it's all for the player to explore. Maybe I should put some kind of a more in-depth description to the final game, but who knows? And last but not least, we have blow control modules. These ones are responsible for creating new branches in the tree, which results in splitting the arrows into multiple new ones. When splitting, arrow's trajectory gets shifted a little, and the rule by which it is done can vary depending on the splitting module you're using. This can be very useful for some weird builds that might need high precision for some reason. I don't know, haven't really come up with any yet. I am not going to talk too in depth about all of these modules here, as I'm planning on making a few small affiliate videos, mainly themed on various action modules and unique little mechanics associated with them. You know, I don't really want my channel to stay dead for another 3 months while I'm working on the next big episode. And now, when mostly everything has been implemented, we can finally check the results. Still remember that explosion rain arrow from the beginning? Here it is now, fully displayed in the UI and functioning in all the glory of the new explosion particles. Also, you can remember this monument that I made very hard to pierce. In fact, it's only good at stopping arrows flying at normal speeds, which means that if we made the arrow go really fast, it would be able to pierce it. But how could we possibly do that? Basically, we have this nice little freeze time module that stops our arrow in time and then releases it, applying everything we threw at it while it was frozen. Do you see where I'm going? Let's freeze the arrow for a while and hit it with dozens of large explosions. When it's finally released, it will fly at a crazy speed, piercing everything in its way. This build is actually a bit more complicated, but I hope to talk more about it in the future videos. Alright, this video was quite a ride for me. I mean, I have celebrated my birthday, got a new microphone, successfully passed all of my exams and spent a week in my hometown. All of that while working on this very episode. I hope you at least liked it. So, I'm planning on making videos more often and spending less time on editing them. Yep, because I do tend to spend like a month doing that. I'm also going to try to stream way more often. And probably gonna try mixing in some gaming into that. I mean, there's still Elden Ring that I want to beat. Yep. So, you can subscribe to this YouTube channel, follow me on Twitch, and join my very dead Discord server. All in order to make sure you don't miss something cool from me. And I will see you next time. K out.